Welcome to this first of 3 videos on different kinds of video recording. Now, if you found yourself here, you are someone who's curious about what you can do with different video cameras, and maybe you haven't played around with the different variety that's out there, but you want to start making content and it's a little bit intimidating. This video series is for you because I'm going to talk about really like the 3 different kinds of amateur level video options that are out there. I'm not going to go into really high level complex cinema cameras, but I'll go up through different kind of like amateur broadcast level video. Now, hopefully you're here because you're at least familiar with your phone and you've shot some things on your phone. And understand that your phone can be super effective for video taking as well as photography. It has a decent sensor, it'll take good video, and if you're looking to just make a mark in social media, you might not need any of this stuff. But I will say there are limitations to your phone, and these cameras can really help you break out if you want to try something different. Maybe you want to broadcast a sports game for the youth sports team in your area. Maybe you want to make more cinematic content that has beautiful lighting and really functional editing. All those things are possible with every kind of video camera, so let's walk through the different kinds that are in front of us right here. Let's start with the first kind, which is very entry-level point and shoot easy cameras. I have here a GoPro. I believe this is the GoPro 12 Black. And these are super nice because they have what all good video cameras should have, which is a very clear record button that's usually red. You click that and you can start recording. And the really nice thing about GoPros is they're tough and they're really good with shaking and motion, which becomes a big deal in videography. You want to stop that as much as possible and get really clean video. Similarly, this is called a DJI Osmo. A DJI Osmo is really cool because it basically connects a very small video camera to a gimbal. And again, it gives you really steady video. Now, both of these are awesome and they can shoot 4K, they can shoot action, they can do all sorts of things that you want video cameras to do. They're limited though because the only ability you have to zoom is what's either inside electronically or physically just moving yourself forward. However, if your goal is just to take videos of action, a GoPro is great. You can mount it to a whole bunch of stuff. Again, it's really tough and it's going to be able to withstand a lot of the kind of pains that your action might put it through. If you're wanting to shoot something like a follow-along video, a vlog, if you're interviewing someone, these DJI Osmos are amazing. They're really well worth the investment. They're better than phone cameras. They're really steady. And I find that people gravitate toward them a lot in my media program because they're quick and easy to use. And their form factor is really nice because they aren't so much to carry around as a big camera. So this DJI Osmo is a great option. The next level of cameras, and the one that most people are going to get into if they're really like, they might call them prosumers, right? Those professional consumers, those above amateurs, is a DSLR, or what we always refer to as a mirrorless camera. I'll be talking about these as mirrorless cameras. In our program, we primarily use these and we were able to get a whole bunch of A6400s. So in this video, I'm specifically talking about Sony mirrorless cameras. So what distinguishes a mirrorless camera from this kind of regular, easy to use camera over here? Well, the most important thing that differentiates it is it has a removable lens. So if I push this button in the front, I can take off the lens, which is really helpful because if I am wanting to shoot something where I want to zoom, it gives me options. So I can get a camera with a large telephoto, like this is my personal Sony A1 with a 135 millimeter lens on it. And that's going to give me a lot of zoom. It's also going to give me a lot of what a lot of people get excited about, which is called bokeh. And that's when the background really blurs out. You can see it on this talking head camera where the background's much more blurred because my aperture is low. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. That's one of the biggest benefits of a mirrorless camera. These also will often take better pictures than these little consumer cameras. And they have the options to shoot video or pictures pretty easily and pretty quickly. This is a great camera if you're looking for just an amateur entry-level camera that's going to do a lot of work for you and you're willing to carry around something a little bit bigger. The next camera we have is this Sony camcorder. Now, again, there's a lot of camcorders out there, but interestingly enough, they're not made as frequently anymore. This one is a 2019 camera and it's awesome. we use it in our program specifically for broadcasting sports and games and some different events, but it can be used to record video as well. It is specifically the Sony PXW Z90V, and you can get it for around $2,700 today in 2024. It used to be around $4,500, I believe, when it first came out. This is excellent. The benefits of these kind of cameras, these camcorders, is if you're really interested in broadcasting sports or shooting things where you need rapid ability to zoom and you don't want to change out your lenses like you might on a mirrorless camera, this has a little rocker switch on it and you can zoom way in on the action or get a really wide shot. It gives you a really nice ability to shoot video, and unlike a mirrorless camera, you can record on this for a long time and it won't time out. Oftentimes on mirrorless cameras, the A64 included, you have a recording limit, which is typically around 30 minutes, but it depends on variables. Additionally, mirrorless cameras can create a lot of heat, and therefore sometimes they'll have to shut down if the environment doesn't really facilitate the mirrorless camera working well with video. And therefore, these for streaming games are not going to be a really good option. But these for streaming games are excellent. These also do a really great job of shooting videos like this one you're watching today. So I can flip this screen out on the side. I have a really nice viewing area, and I can flip that around so that people could see whatever they want to see as they're videoing. It also has a really nice microphone insert here, and that works really well so that you can film whatever you want to film. None of these are really better or worse than each other. Obviously, a lot of people really like mirrorless cameras because they just give you a really nice variety of things to do. But again, I see people grabbing this Osmo a lot more than the mirrorless cameras for certain applications. And then of course, if we're broadcasting games, we always reach for these, but we've used these mirrorless cameras on gimbals and kind of run and gun opportunities. Now, there's so much more I could say about the benefits and the drawbacks of each of these. And as we go through this series, I'm going to talk through those really specifically. But for now, one of the things I want to teach you how to do is just record a very simple video. Again, this is for someone who maybe has first stepped into videography and they're stepping up from their camera and they just don't really know what they're doing. So they want to practice with these different pieces of gear. So the first thing you need to do to record a video, and this is going to sound so simple, is you got to find the record button. Well, I guess first you have to turn it on. And part of turning it on is make sure your battery's charged. I've seen it so many times in our program when students forget to put in the battery or forget to charge a battery, and then they get out to their location and the battery's dead and they can't film what they want to film. And it's, heartbreaking in its own way because you've set up all this other stuff and you're ready to go. So always have an extra battery if you can, or just make sure it's fully charged. So once you know it's fully charged, locate the on and off button. For something like this little DJI Osmo, if I hold on the side here, that's the power button. And of course, the manual is always going to tell you where the power button is. For the GoPro, the power button's on the side here. It might be dead, so we can't worry about that, but it's right here on the side. So I'm going to turn that on as well. For the Sony, I have an on-off rocker at the top, and that turns on. Almost every camera will always also turn on the screen once you turn on the camera. And then lastly, the broadcast camera, these are really neat because if you flip out the screen, it turns on automatically and it's really quick to turn on. The other way you can turn on a broadcast camera like this one is if you pull this out on the back, it will turn on. Then you can push it back in and it'll turn off. So you know how to turn on the camera. Now you need to record something. So even though you've just turned it on, you can turn it back off and locate the SD card or micro SD card slot. A micro SD card is a really small version of an SD card, so nothing too surprising. Typically, how you'll know whether or not you need to use a micro SD card or an SD card is the size of the camera. So for a bigger mirrorless camera, you're almost always going to be using SD cards. For something larger like a broadcast camera, you're also going to be using an SD card. Now there's external ways to record, there's all these other things, but just to keep it simple, SD card is all you're looking for. Smaller cameras like these require micro SD cards, very small cards that are going to fit in here. They're light, they're small, but they work well and they're pretty easy to use. So it's nothing surprising. Next, we're going to figure out how do you put in the SD card, because Again, it seems really simple and maybe it's straightforward. And if you look at a manual or you just look around the camera, you're going to find the slot eventually. But some of them get confusing. So for instance, on my A1, this kind of camera is a really nice professional level camera, and its port for the SD cards is on the side here. And I can close that. It has dual card slots, which is really nice because you can have an automatic backup. But on something like the A6400, it's actually kind of confusing to people who first see it. They might look on the side and find a couple different doors, but they can't seem to find the SD card. So on an A6400, if you flip this switch and open it up, the SD card's in the bottom. And if you try to pinch it out, you're never going to get it. What you have to do is push it and then pull it out. And you can usually grab the sides. And there we go. We have our SD card right here. And then we can put it back in the bottom and then pinch it in. I always recommend to people, don't force it. If you're ever using an SD card and you're like shoving really hard, stop. You're doing something wrong. Always pause and ask someone or try to figure out what you're doing with the SD card that's not quite correct. Most cameras will have like a little graphic, as this one does, on the bottom, and that graphic will tell you how to put the SD card in there. So be really mindful whenever you're putting your SD card in, because there's nothing more sad than you spent, $1,000 on a camera and then you somehow break the SD card slot and it becomes relatively unusable. For something smaller like the DJI Osmo, the SD card slot is right on the side here. There's this little slot and you put the micro SD card in there. I'm currently using this micro SD card for my microphone, so that's why that's not available right here. All right, now that we have an SD card in our camera, we need to take a video. So with this, what I can do is turn it on, find the record button, and the record button is almost always red, as I said earlier in the video. And I'm just going to tap that record button. If I tap this record button, you can see on the camera back that it has a little rec. And so that rec is telling me that it is recording currently, which is like the back of my hand. But that recording is very important because I know it's working properly. It'll have a little timer that's counting up and I can start shooting video. Now, that's the real simple way to do it. We're going to get to all the complexities of things like shutter speed, frame rate, all that kind of stuff. But just to get started, one of the things I think you don't want to do as a first-time videographer is overcomplicate it. Just get out there, turn it on, hit record, and start filming some things. Then once you bring it back, you might say, ooh, that looks terrible. And if it looks terrible, that's okay, because that's part of the whole world of learning how to do videography better, right? You shouldn't be perfect when you first start, and there's so much to learn. So you've recorded a video, you've stopped it, and the next thing we need to do is learn how to upload that video onto your computer so that you can then start editing the video in a program like Adobe Premiere or DaVinci Resolve or whatever you feel like using. Then the last thing you're going to do, which is really simple, is you need to take your SD card that you took from your camera and put it into the computer. Now, usually some computers have slots for SD cards specifically, but usually you'll need some kind of SD card reader, and you'll know it's an SD card reader just because it'll have the slots that then fit an SD card conveniently. So you'll slide it in there and then just plug it into your USB on your computer. And on the computer, you'll actually see typically a folder will open up if you're on a PC. If it doesn't, you can always click your File Explorer. And then what I like to do is split the screen with two different File Explorer windows. One I can put on the desktop. The other one will say USB drive D, which is just where mine's located. For pictures or videos, you're going to see these two different folders that Sony creates. Videos always go in this folder called private. I don't know why it's called private, but that's just what it's called. And then in this case, it's going to be in the M for root, and then drag whatever video over that you want to use. You'll see it go to complete. And then you know you have a video. I would really recommend you always drag over your videos as soon as you're done filming, because you just never know. Cards can become corrupted, things can fail, and you want to make sure that you can get that stuff from your camera and use it in the video as quickly as possible. Now, before I let you go, a couple tips about shooting video on something like a mirrorless camera, especially, but it applies to kind of every camera. Number one, as I said before, don't forget to charge your battery and make sure you have a fully charged battery. Number two, make sure that you have an SD card inserted and that you have space on your SD card. You don't want to be at your event and suddenly saying, shoot, I don't have enough space, let me delete things, because you might accidentally delete something that you really actually wanted to keep. Number three, check the cleanliness of your lens. These lenses are great, and generally you're not going to notice if it's dirty, but sometimes, especially if there's a really strong backlight, you are going to notice that it's dirty, and that becomes problematic for your overall quality of your video. Number four, use a tripod. One of the enemies of good video is shakiness, and so a tripod like this, you can get this on Amazon for about $70. Sometimes it's on sale for even less. But a good tripod like this is going to have a pivoting head like this. So it has a little ball joint head so that you can adjust your camera and make sure it's level. And then it's also going to allow you to raise and lower the tripod. Obviously, if it's a tripod, it should have 3 feet, and that will allow you to make it stable on the ground. A good tripod is well worth the money. They can be very expensive. I've found that if you're first early into videography, you don't need something super expensive. Just go with something that's going to work for you for that first video. The last tip I'll give you, it's the most important one for making videos, is make sure you're recording. This sounds silly, as many things sound silly, and maybe that's because I've been doing video for a little while, but what I see so often with students is they've done everything. They've set up their lights, they've set up their audio, they've set up their whole system, and they're really excited about it, but they forget to actually record the video. And it sucks because you've done all that work. Your client came in or the talent came in. Everybody's excited about this shoot, and then it doesn't record. And it's painful, but maybe it's one of those things you just kind of have to go through because sometimes that just happens in the real world. And if you're new into this and you get a more complex camera, like a mirrorless camera, take the time to watch some video overviews or read the manual and just kind of get familiar with how these cameras work. There's so many different buttons. It can be pretty confusing, but it can also be awesome to work with. If you have something like this DJI Osmo, hit record and go. I mean, that's kind of the cool thing about these little guys is you can just get going. Same with a GoPro. They're limited to how you can zoom and what you can do with it, but you can get it, shoot and go. A lot of YouTubers use GoPros because they're so convenient to put up in your shop. And for someone like me, I'm in a wood shop right now because I have a woodworking channel. And this kind of use of a GoPro is awesome because they're tough. If they fall on the concrete floor, it's not going to be a huge tragedy of losing a really expensive camera. But they're limited, and I don't ever use them for photography or anything else like that. It's just for video, and it's just for like a single view of video. I can't zoom in and do the things that I really want to do easily. There are ways around that, but to easily do it is not really possible. Anyway, those are the tips. Thanks for watching this first video. In the second video, we're going to start to dive into some more complexities of cameras. So if this one felt like, wow, that's real basic information, good. That means you know it. Maybe the next video will help you elaborate on that and really understand it a little bit better.